I speak to you in the name of the Holy One who stills the storms and calms the raging seas. Amen. Our gospel this morning tells us that Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of them. But when evening came, the boat was being battered by the waves and was far from the land because the wind was against them. It's not really all that hard for us to imagine what it was like for the disciples on the lake crossing the Sea of Galilee in the dark of night. All we need to do is think about the storms that have been blowing through our own lives. Think about those times when our lives have been drenched in darkness. Not just regular night darkness, but the darkness we experience at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning on a cloudy night. The darkness where we cannot see our hand in front of our face. The sort of darkness where we cannot know what lies ahead, or we cannot know when we'll arrive to the other side. The sort of darkness where we cannot know if we're even going in the right direction. Think of those times when it's felt as though you were drowning in fear and you began to see ghosts. Something was there. Something was surely going to get you. Now, ghosts may or may not be real, but fear is most certainly real. Can you remember those times when the winds of change were blowing against you, and no matter what you did, no matter how hard you rowed, you couldn't make any progress and you got nowhere? Can you remember those times when the circumstances of life battered you over and over like ocean waves? Storms come in all sorts of different ways, striking individuals and families and churches and nations in the world. Maybe our storms come from the form of sickness and disease, of divorce or schism, of famine or war. We can all tell our stories about when our lives have been blown off course, when the structures of our lives have been washed away, when our hopes and plans have been damaged or destroyed. And inevitably, when the storms of life arise, so too do our questions of faith. Do we have faith? Do we have the right kind of faith? Do we have enough faith? That's why Jesus' question of Peter so often haunts us as we cross the seas of life. Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? There's something about that question itself that makes quick and superficial and trite answers and assumptions oh so too easy for us. You just need faith. If you had more faith, your prayers would be answered. If you had a different kind of faith, your life would be better. It would be easier. If your faith was stronger, you wouldn't doubt or struggle or question. Has anyone ever said anything like that to you? Have you ever said anything like that to another? I wonder what would have happened if Peter had more faith or enough faith or a different kind of faith. Well, the usual answer is that Peter's fear would have disappeared, that the wind and the waves of the storm would have been of no consequence to him, and he would have continued walking on the water. But I think we need to be careful. I think there's a real danger in this kind of theology and this understanding of faith. This sort of understanding tells us that if we simply have enough faith, we'll overcome the storms of life in some spectacular way. If we have the right sort of faith, we'll somehow transcend the laws of nature and physics and biology, and will somehow defy gravity. This distortion of faith is what causes some people to forgo treatment for easily treatable medical conditions, or to forgo a simple vaccination because God will somehow keep the virus from affecting faithful people. This is not the kind of faith to which we're called, though. This is not what true faith is all about. This is more akin to magic than it is to faith. This is faith that seeks proof and evidence in order to support our belief. This kind of faith will never be able to carry us through the storms of life, and we will eventually sink like a rock in water. That's what happened to Peter. So perhaps it's not a coincidence that his name in Greek, Petros, means rock. No matter how much faith we have, disease will take its toll on our bodies, and accidents will happen, and loved ones will die. Despite our faith, life is difficult, and relationships break up, and we don't always get what we want. No matter how strong our faith is, the sea of life will get rough, will get stormy. Maybe our usual answer then is simply wrong. Maybe faith has nothing to do with walking on the water through the storms of life, but is instead about staying in the boat. With a different kind of faith, Peter would have stayed in the boat. O you of little faith, why do you doubt? Maybe Jesus is asking Peter why he got out of the boat at all. After all, Jesus is the one who made the disciples get into the boat in the first place. Jesus is the one who told them to go on ahead to the other side. Jesus is the one who prayed during their night voyage. Jesus is the one who came to them in the midst of the storm. Jesus is the one who reassured them, saying, "Take heart, it's me. Don't be afraid." It was Peter's idea to get out of the boat. Peter's the one who wanted to defy gravity, the one who sought some spectacular proof of Jesus' identity, of his presence and power. "Lord, if it really is you, command me to walk on the water." Peter's words are eerily reminiscent of an earlier time in an earlier place. When Jesus was in the wilderness and Satan tempts him, "If you are the Son of God, command these rocks. If you are the Son of God, command the angels." Peter's faith has taken him out of the boat, and he's put God to the test. I don't say any of this to judge Peter. I don't criticize him. I say this as one who too often recognizes some of myself in Peter, as one who wants to walk on water and escape the storms of my life. I say this as one who's seen and heard others express the same desire. At some level, I think we all probably have lived with Peter's faith. And to the extent that we have, we need to go on ahead to a different kind of faith. The disciples' voyage across the sea is like a passage from one kind of faith to another. It's the journey from a faith used to escape life's storms to a faith that carries us through them. From an exterior faith of physical presence and proof to an interior faith of spiritual presence. From a faith dependent on the circumstances of our lives to one that experiences Christ's presence regardless of what's going on around us. Jesus may have physically separated himself from the disciples and sent them on ahead, but he never, ever left them. Their faith and our faith must now be experienced as something larger than Jesus' physical presence, not limited by the boundaries of what can be seen and heard and understood, independent of miracles that overcome the laws of nature. Jesus is taking us from a get out of the boat kind of faith to a stay in the boat kind of faith. This transition of faith only happens, though, in the dark night of our lives, in the midst of life's storms. For in every storm of life, we must decide whether to get out or to stay in. Faith is not a way for us to escape the winds and waves of life. It's a way through the storms of life. And sometimes faithfulness means staying in the boat and simply rowing. The stay in the boat kind of faith knows that Christ is always coming to us and that we're never abandoned, ever. There's no storm we go through in which Christ is not with us. The stay in the boat kind of faith never gives up because Christ never gives up on us. With every storm through which we sail, Jesus comes to us saying, take heart. It's me. Don't be afraid. And he gets into the boat with us, and the winds cease. Our walking on water is not the miracle. The miracle is that Christ is stronger than any storm that comes our way. The miracle is that with Christ in a boat with us, we pass through the storms of life to a new shore and to a renewed life. Amen.